All right. Other economic statistics. So this is the Fed's latest forecast that just came out last week, and it's all good news. So what they're saying, if you look in the upper left corner for 2023, that the September projection was for growth of 2.1, and it's going to be 2.6. And the other years didn't change very much, plus or minus, a tenth of a point. So all good. The unemployment rate right on target, no change there. The inflation number that they often use, what they call the PCE inflation, they lowered it. Look at how that 3.3 went to 2.8. That was very good news. And the interest rate, the core, whether it's core or real, core or the non-core, it's both of them. They brought it down a ways, and they brought down the interest rate a little bit from where they thought it would be. So very good news there. And if you look at right next to that, in 2024, that interest rate fell by 0.5 point, September to their latest projection. That is probably what got the big stock market rally going for the last week or so. Was that stock and bond rally was that right there, that little adjustment and all the talking points that went with it. So generally, very favorable news, lower interest rates, lower inflation, other stuff pretty status quo. That's great news. Let's go to the next slide. This gets back to the sentiment question we had before, which is, this is an idea that there are, if you take like 10 or 12, I forget the exact numbers, like 12 or 13 measures, they were pretty predictive of sentiment until the pandemic hit. And then there's this big disconnect between the blue and red line has formed. And so it's predicted sentiment based on this model, this 12 or 13 variable model that they're using, and then what they actually saw. And so in 2018 and 19, the blue line was above the red line. Things were perceived better than they really were. And now it's the opposite. The red line is higher than the blue line. And some of that, again, is the marketing, is saying the economy is the greatest ever. You say it enough, people will believe you when you're the president. And this is, and the media will amplify that message. So this is where we are right now with this big disconnect. So again, we've been talking about reasons, so let's move on. Let's look at some of the data that we collected and we found. So Krugman's argument is, look at what people are doing and not what they're saying. Meaning people are, even though the consumer sentiment has fell a lot, the change in the spending is actually up. And so if he's comparing two periods of time, 2007 to 2010, and then 2019 to 2023, in both cases, consumer sentiment fell about the same, but in this case, people are spending 9% more versus -1. In other words, people were behaving as though things were bad, but right now they're not behaving as if things are bad. So his article was titled there at the bottom, "Feelings about the economy are a partisan thing." So that's part of his thesis is, yeah, people are complaining, but they're behaving like things are really good. Let's go to the next slide. He also has a few items in here where he did some research on this. And I don't have this chart in here, but there's a couple of slides I've seen over the years that are really good that show that as soon as you switch the presidency, people that had a positive view of the economy go negative. Democrats tend to stay much closer to reality than Republicans do under those conditions, meaning the swing is much more pronounced when we went from Trump to Biden for Republicans than it was for Democrats going the other way, meaning getting more positive when Biden came into power. And the effect is 2.5 times as large for Republicans. So he used the term asymmetric amplification. Republicans are uniformly hating this economy, like that it has like 6% approval or something from Republicans. And no matter how good it is, it's going to be negative. That was one point he's making here. Another one is the media, that they just can't say nice things about Biden. And he uses this funny example down here. He says, job growth comes in above expectations, but they'll say rapid job growth may slow soon. Experts say posing problems for Biden. Everything's posing problems for Biden. Every piece of good news is, but it poses a problem for Biden. So it's just there. At some point, you just got to shake your head and say, really, Krugman is kind of thrown in the towel on this. And he's sort of saying, enough already. You're behaving like you're spending, you're spending like the economy's good. The data shows the economy is good. Enough already. I'm just not going to put weight on these things anymore. So good for him. He's got a giant platform and he's using it for the cause. Next slide. This is one that says that Americans have no idea what's actually going on in the economy. And this is from out of the country. This is from the Financial Times out of the UK. So every one of the things every question they ask, people got the wrong answer. Like the red is what percent of people polled got it wrong. So prices have risen faster than wages over the past year. Wages have actually gone up faster. People said prices have gone up faster. That's a 90-10. That's a great example of how this real wage communication by the media saying prices have been falling and just hammering that over and over again got into people's brains. And media narratives are very hard to reverse. That's where, Biden and the Democratic machine have got to get on this. But this just shows you that sentiment is predicated on people that don't understand the facts right now to a great extent. I won't say great. I don't know that it's great. I will say to some extent, people do not know what is actually happening. And you'll get a kick out of reading through all of these when you see it. Now, go ahead, Karl. And Karl, you brought up the idea for this next slide. Do you want to cover it, or I can do it if you don't want to?
Well, my idea, and I haven't really focused how you put it into this slide, because I was planning to discuss it at a future meeting. It was the idea that a lot of the official government statistics show that we're better off now than we were in 2019, but they show that we're better off now than they were in 2020 and 2021. And there were a whole bunch of government programs going on that made what was happening in 2020 and 2021 better than today. And some of those examples are the 3 rounds of checks that we got during the pandemic, the extra unemployment benefits, student loan repayments were suspended, evictions were blocked. Anyone who got on Medicaid at any point in most states couldn't be kicked off until this year, the end of the pandemic. There was also increased child care assistance that ended in September. And then you've got not really part of that, but about 60% of Americans think we're in a recession. Maybe that's because they don't get those extra benefits anymore. I mean, okay, I paid off my student loans back in the 80s, so that one doesn't affect me. But these are real for a lot of people.
I think this is about as good an explanation as there is out there for why people are unhappy. Is they had it really good for a couple of years in terms of tremendous government benefits, a big expansion of the welfare state, and that has been removed over the past couple of years. And Karl came up with the text on the right-hand side. I thought that was very well researched. I just tried to explain it a little with this graph on the left, which is real disposable personal income. So real always means inflation adjusted whenever you see that. That spiked tremendously. Those two bumps are the CARES Act and the Rescue Act. And there's a third one in there. I'm not sure what that was, but you've got, I guess that's the one in the middle is the December 2020 Trump. There was a big omnibus bill, I think, or what was that thing called, Karl? Do you remember? It was a big appropriations bill.
Second round of checks.
Yeah. So there was
and it pushed the extra 300 a week on unemployment out until Biden took office.
Okay, so that's where those 3 peaks are in there. Is the first one is the CARES Act, the second one is that Trump item in December before he left, and the third one is the Rescue Act from Biden. And so these put a lot of money in people's pockets. Whether you look at the red line or the blue line now is you take all that out, and clearly you don't have the giant spikes in there. There's some variation anyway, but both measures, though, are better than they were in 2019, regardless of how you look at it. The expanded welfare state slightly, the red line, or kind of the take all that out line, both are better than 2019. And as we've said, 2019 had much better sentiment, but it's fair to understand that people are disappointed that they're not getting all this stuff that they got. That child tax credit was a lot of money if you had 2 or 3 kids. A lot of money if you had 1, but I mean, it's for 3, it's quite a lot of money. Those checks were a lot. Both parents got it in most families. I mean, there was a really, if you managed to keep your job during the pandemic, you had a lot of pocket money. And we didn't get into the causes of some of the inflation. We've discussed that at length in earlier meetings, but all that money in people's pockets is a big reason why we had inflation. And not just from the Biden spike there, but also from the 2 Trump spikes that put money in people's pockets. Next slide. Just a couple miscellaneous ones. One Republican talking point is that that Biden conducted a war on oil and prevented us from producing. And in fact, not only is our share of the world production as high as it's ever been, but the amount of monthly crude oil production is as high as it's ever been under Biden. So either if he's doing a terrible job, his war on oil is really failing. But the Republicans aren't saying that. They're saying he's still conducting his war on oil, and but the energy production is quite solid.
Canceled that Keystone XL pipeline, and that was the reason that gas prices spiked years later or a year later.
Yes, right. And it never was actually in operation, was it?
Well, there was a Keystone pipeline that was and is in operation, and the Keystone XL pipeline never got built. It was about 8%.
It was a truly bogus talking point, but it got a lot of traction. It got repeated enough. So
I'm still hearing it.
Oh yeah. Oh geez.
Slide.
Yes, thank you. Crime also, violent crime, and the list of what those crimes are is at the bottom. According to FBI data, this is the number of violent crimes per 100,000 population, and it peaked. Recent peak was in 2020 under Trump, and then it fell in 2021 and 2022 under Biden. And it takes them a while to get the 323 data out, so haven't got that yet. But the point being, 2021, 2022, violent crime has been falling under Biden. We're not being overrun by criminal immigrants. If we're being overrun by immigrants, they're not committing crimes. At least they weren't in 2022. And this is a good story, but we don't tell it enough. The way Republicans portray the cities is there's a law and order problem, and things are out of control, and they need to come back into power to get all those minorities and immigrants back in line. And that's their story, but we have a better story, which is that violent crime is down under us. Next line. Inequality. All right. So the CBO does a wonderful report every year on inequality. It's listed down there at the bottom. It always is a couple of years behind because it takes them a while to get the data set from the IRS and do all this stuff. So this is through 2020. 2020 was an unusual year, obviously, because of all of the CARES Act. And this would be 2020. So this is before the Biden Rescue Act. It would also include that December, most likely, I think that December Trump Act that we talked about briefly, that would be in here as well, I believe, or at least partially. But it's a good story, actually, that inequality got better in 2020 after taxes. And what this shows here is that if you look at income before transfers and taxes, inequality got a little worse. The income fell for the lowest and got higher for the richer. That's the green line going down in the lowest quintile says inequality is getting worse. Their income is dropping, and then the income is going up for those upper groups. So the left side here says worse inequality. The right-hand side, though, says better inequality, meaning the poorer folks, that lowest quintile, lowest 20%, got relatively more of a percent increase in their income than the other groups. So that's an inequality improving picture after taxes and transfers. All right, let's keep going. Let's look at some actual numbers. And just to level set, where do you have to be in one of these groups? In 2020, if you were a 3-person household, to be in the middle, so that 40th to 60th percentile, right around the middle, you had to make, as a family, these are all household data, it's all household, by the way, $77,400 for the household. To be in the top 1%, you got to go all the way to the right. For a 3-person family, you'd have to make 809. And so you can look at these different things. All right, let's keep going. And by the way, all this data here is real, meaning it's in what would be the 2020 dollars, because this report is as of 2020. And this is just showing the bottom 4 quintiles, so the bottom 80% in 4 groups. You can see that the trend is up for all of them since 1979. The incomes have been going up. This is a good story. You don't often hear this. You hear that I showed you that real wage diagram, that it peaked in 74 and then fell for 20 years and then it come back up. This isn't the case for household income as measured by CBO. After taxes and transfers, that money has been steadily climbing, which is a good news story. And you can see in the most recent year that big spike. there was, because of all this extra money that came into people's pockets, that's a big disconnect from what was happening before. And you can see the numbers on the right about how much they increased, but every group had a big gain versus 2019 and from 2019 to 2020. If you look at that, the black part Q1, first quartile, plus 15%, blue 13, green 11, top 8. So good news story there. Let's keep going.
Yeah, people like free money.
Hey, we'll take it. That's a big spike right there. That's a nice little hook there at the end
The
of that.
Republicans want credit for giving out the free money with us, but they don't want credit for having given out the free money and inflated the deficit.
Yeah, right. They'll take it. They will take the free money and heck with the deficit. Average after-tax money, again, now I'm using the upper 20% now split into two lines. So the 81st to 99th group and the top 1%. Now you can see the top 1% is leaving even the 81st to 99th percentile behind. And that's where the income inequality story that you always hear in the news is, with that top 1% group just leaving everybody behind in terms of their growth and how fast things are growing. And that's, the top 1% at $1.6 million after tax. Not bad for a household. Pardon me, to make $1.6 million in a year. I'll take it. It would be nice.
I mean, over the course of a number of years, but
right. It's true. But the reason I split this chart is because if you put all these in one chart, you can barely see the differences like I showed in the last page. So when you do show it, everything else gets crammed to the bottom, and you can see the top one just leaving everybody behind. At least you can see it here for the next group. So next slide. So now we're talking about share. So this is the percent of income. This is where you hear about inequality, is who's getting the biggest percent of the pie. And you can see the middle 60% have been on this sort of steady decline. The 81st and 99th is sort of flat. Top 1% has been climbing, although they're not at their peak right now. 2007 was the peak for the top 1%. This is after-tax income. So this is same stuff we've been talking about. All these slides are after-tax income, I think, because I think it's easier to explain that that's what's in people's pockets. So the top 1% have 13.2% of the income, and that had peaked more like 16%, I think, in 2007. So inequality has gotten a little better, at least from that perspective of the bottom 99% are getting more of the share, and the bottom 20%, fairly flat as well. I think when you do look at the number, let's see, what did we say? That table in the upper right helps you kind of see the exact number now. The bottom 20% is actually up a little bit. The middle 60 is down. The 81st to 99th is down. And the top 1% is up when I compare 1979 to the latest 2020. And you can do the same comparison for 2007. So this is data right out of the chart. It's just easier to see it, kind of the exact number. Top 1% is still doing, punching way above their weight. They don't get 1% of the income, they get 13. The middle 60 is punching below their weight, they get 46% of the income now.
But remember that every quintile has significant income gains.
That's right.
Percentage of the total, they may not, but every income quintile had real income gains.
Yep.
So is equality more important or getting more money?
Yep. That's a fair point.
Inequality went way, way down during the Great Depression.
The rich got bankrupted. Yep.
and World War II.
Yep.
And, huge catastrophes helped greatly reduce inequality. To me, reducing inequality is not my goal. My goal is to have everybody doing better. And I don't care if I'm keeping up with the Joneses.
Yep. No, that's a great perspective. How much does this income share change cost the typical family? Let's look at the next slide. Try to make this real for people. So I'm using the middle 20% group. The income share in 1979 was 16.4, and now it's 15.0. So it fell. And what does that mean? Well, the row D there, the average income after taxes and transfers in 2020 was about $84,000. And if you multiply that by that ratio, 16.4 over 15, you multiply that by that income share change, you're getting that would give you 92,000, meaning if that group was getting 16.4% of the money, they'd be getting 92,000, and that difference is that roughly $8,000 number. That's again a back of the envelope calculation, kind of like I did with the corporate profits, but it gives you a sense of somewhere around 8,000. And I've seen full studies of this that are just a few years old that give you a similar number. During that, I remember one that Larry Summers shared that was 7,000 for, and I think he was talking though about the bottom 80% of families. If you had shifted that money from the top 1% into the bottom 80, that they'd all be up like 7,000. So I feel pretty confident this is a conservative number, but it gives you a sense of, would you like to have that $8,000 a year? Sure. You know, and if we can do better to raise taxes and transfer that money, then let's do it. That's sort of a part of the progressive vision, is an inequality vision. Yeah, you want to grow the pie, but inequality is something that's very much forefront of it. And this is a way of dollarizing it. It's about 8,000. What does inequality cost you? What does it mean? $8,000 for the middle class. That's a shorthand way of thinking about it. All right.
As long as your attempt to reduce inequality doesn't affect the size of the pie.
Doesn't hurt it. Yeah. Yep.
And that's an important caveat on this whole analysis.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully you don't raise taxes so much you're crippling the economy. Hopefully you can avoid that. I think we got room to do that. Now, there was a question about wealth. The wealth inequality, the share of money that the top groups own wealth inequality is much worse than income inequality. The top, and I have some slides that we shared a little while ago, but the slides I'm sharing here are not share slides. These are just what's happened to the net worth of different groups, the bottom 50% group and the 50th to 90th group since 2019. Again, these are real numbers adjusted for inflation. The bottom 50% group's up 50%, 53%. The 50th to 90th group is up about 15%. Both peaked during the Biden administration and have come down a little bit, mainly because the stock market had peaked. And this quarterly data is a little behind the times. We're starting to hit those all-time records again for the stock market, but also housing prices have come off their absolute peaks as well a little bit. And so that's why you're seeing these numbers coming down from those peaks in early 2022. Americans became the richest ever. The real net worth was the highest it's ever been in early 2022 under Biden. And it's come down a little bit, but it's still way up over 2019. So this is a good news story. It just, if you want to, you're in the media, you're going to say, well, you know, net worth is down under Biden. It's like, well, no, it hit the record under Biden and it's down from the record, but it's still way up. So this is great news from a wealth perspective, but we don't have the slides here. You could find them going a month or two back. We had them, but it shows that the good news was the wealth share of the bottom 50% went up, but the bottom 50% captures very little of the wealth that is generated, relatively speaking, and also has very little of it. The bottom 50% have like $3.5 trillion, and the U.S. net worth is like 140 or 150 trillion. So it's the bottom 50% have very little wealth of the country. But good news story here, at least for the net worth. Let's keep going. We're almost done here. So this is a comparison of 2023 on average versus 2019 on average for a bunch of the key measures that we've talked about. And all of them that I'm sharing here are better under Biden. You can find a couple others like real median household income that we don't have 2023 yet. We've got it through 2022. It's down a little bit from 2019. The poverty rate is a little bit higher than 2019, but 2019 was the best year ever. For poverty, the poverty rate is just slightly higher and is more like 2017 and 2018. It's not an unusually high number. It's just not as low as 19. But all these measures that are here are critical economic measures. They are all better under Biden and a lot better in most cases. So, you know, we've talked about every one of these numbers. I think we didn't talk about the stock market. If you average the Trump era with the Biden era, the stock market is about 50% higher under Biden. If you average the entire Biden era and the entire Trump era, and the uninsured is way lower now. That's a great improvement in the uninsured. So let's keep going. That's a great slide to share. I hope you all share it and talk about these numbers wherever you can. And then this one is the same idea, that this one actually has a comparison to when Biden started. Also, the numbers are generally better under Biden. There's, in both cases, whether you compare to 2019 or 2021, they are better. The methodology here is points in time, meaning I'm not averaging. These are Biden latest data versus Biden starting month or quarter versus Trump, start just pre-pandemic month or quarter. And understand that the unemployment rate is much better under Biden on average, and hit lower levels. It hit 3.4 under Biden, but the latest reading is slightly higher than just before the pandemic. That's why I like using the average methodology. It takes some of this distortion out. But 10 of 12 measures that I'm sharing here are better, whether you look at the Biden start or 2019. All right, and I think one more chart, and then we're done, is this is a presentation that the White House put out. Lael Brainerd, I think it's Lael Brainerd, was the Fed vice chair, and now she's the director of the NEC for Biden, and she put out sort of, I wouldn't call it a puff piece, but it was about as partisan and friendly as you're going to get. It was a several-page memo. You can find it there, and I've also got it linked on the last page of the presentation that has it. But she's sharing some of the measures that are better or worse than before the pandemic. I think one of the things that got caught in her brain when she was probably doing this was points in time, and rather than using the averages. By using the 2019 average and the 2023 average, you got a lot more measures that look cleanly better. So I think she just tried it this way, and there's some really good information in her presentation, and there's in the document that she did, the PDF, and there's a few other slides that are pretty good in there too that you may want to share. But it's a good briefing. It actually goes through, it's paragraphs and paragraphs. It's not just slides. It's actual, it's a short report, and a very good background for people that are into reading this stuff. All right, I think that's it. We can go to answer some of these questions, but there are links there, and the Lael Brainerd memo is the first thing on the list. So you got it right up there.
Okay, shall we go look at what's in the chat and what questions people want to shout out?
Take a look at the chat here.
And I'll comment on Mark Lundholm's, Jewel and Mariano's prices seem very increased. Well, if you're shopping for a spiral sliced ham, those are 99 cents a pound. Not a spiral sliced pre-cooked ham are like 59 cents a pound, which is historically pretty low prices. On the other hand, hams were expensive at Thanksgiving. The spiral sliced hams were more like $3 a pound.
Is this a case of leftover stock or something that they're trying to blow out, or
I think they just decided to go ahead and have they promoted turkeys and got the turkey stock up for Thanksgiving and the ham for Christmas.
Okay. Well, I guess you do have to run loss leaders to get people in your store sometimes. So,
yeah.
Karl, this is Mark here. I would just like to add, I don't have statistics to back this up, but I also shop at Trader Joe's, and they seem to be a bit more reasonable. I don't know. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but
I don't know. I don't tend to shop at Trader Joe's just because the physical locations around me in Chicago. In a 1 mile radius, I have one Mariano's, 2 Jewels, an Aldi's, and a Target, and a whole bunch of Asian grocery stores on Argyle. So the Trader Joe's doesn't fit in my 1 mile radius. But my friend who shopped,
Aldi's connected with them somehow, but I don't know how. I don't go there, but
there's no official corporate
companies.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that. No, I was going to say the same thing before he made the comment about Trader Joe's, that I was surprised because I didn't shop there for the whole pandemic, and I just started going back, and the prices were the same almost as before the pandemic. I was shocked. It seems like the same, like they haven't Trader Joe's. And then Trader Joe's and Aldi's, I heard that they're both German companies owned by brothers or something like that. I don't know. So
So there's no corporate relationship.
Initially, Aldi was owned by two brothers, and Trader Joe's was opened by one of the two brothers. I think things changed at some point, but I don't recall exactly how.
Yeah. I remember during egg
it's-
shortage a year ago when a bunch of stores raised their prices. Trader Joe's continued to have a dozen eggs for $2.99 a dozen, but they sold out a lot. That was their loss leader. Where other stores, Jewel and Mariano's may have had $4 a dozen as their cheapest eggs. And I'm not talking free range and organic and whatever. But now I'm seeing eggs back down more in the $1 to $1.50 a dozen. And I'm not sure I'm seeing that at Trader Joe's.
So one of your earlier comments, Karl, reminded me of a story I'd heard, and I don't know whether the story is apocryphal or true. And if it's true, I'd like to, know where the documentation of it is. But the claim was that they did a poll or study at Harvard, and the students and faculty who took the poll were supposed to pick between two hypothetical worlds. And in both hypothetical worlds, they were supposed to assume that the cost of all goods and services were identically the same, which is not a realistic assumption, but they were supposed to assume that. In the first hypothetical world, they made twice as much money as everybody else. In the second hypothetical world, they made twice as much money as they did in the first hypothetical world, but everybody else made more than them. Okay, so in the second world, they could buy more, but they weren't at the rich end of the economy. And apparently, according to the claim, most of the students and staff would rather have lived in the first hypothetical world. And when you consider that many of our executives and corporate and government officials have gone to that college, that's an interesting thing to wonder about. But is it true?
Well, I don't know about poll numbers being true. So
I have a little science here about the food stores. I decided to make a major buy for my local food pantry, and so I identified the things that they said they wanted, and then I went out and priced them selectively from Trader Joe's, Mariano's, Woodman's, and Aldi and Jewel. And what I found was for specific, it varied because for certain key, if you're going shopping for what the food pantries want, I found certain keystone items to be, you identified them: milk, eggs, bacon, baked beans, cereal. Those things that the food pantry said they wanted tend to be certain. Well, in fact, Woodman's tend to be and Aldi tend to be the lowest. But when you looked across the board at the things that people actually buy, the prices were really pretty much all over the place. So it's a little bit hard to say which of these sources is lowest, a lot dependent on what you were actually looking to purchase. So I wanted to spend actually a significant sum, $300 or $400 for the food pantry. And that's why I did this research and wound up making most of my buy at Aldi's and at Woodman's.
yeah, the only thing I'll make a point on food pantry stuff is a lot of times the people receiving the food don't have access to refrigeration and milk and things like that.
Right, these were all staples.
And so for mac and cheese, Aldi has a mac and cheese that doesn't require dairy products, that I haven't, my sister who we did the shopping with, she was aware of that was the way to go for mac and cheese for them, because you can get it at Aldi's. Susan.
Yeah, I would just like to offer that I completely changed the way I ended up shopping pre-pandemic to now. So the chance to pick up groceries, it was when I was still working, of course, that I totally changed the stores I went to because you could order it all. Like I was never an online shopper for groceries, and it turned me into doing far more grocery shopping online, and it was, Target one simply because of location and ease of ordering, putting the application on my phone. It just changed my habits. And so does that, you think, play into some way? Well, it's not a perception, but it was a reality of the prices changing on what I was my core shopping list that's pretty similar every week. And the only thing that varies is I've really got to pretty much always go to Aldi's for cat food and litter because it stayed consistent and I loved it and my cat likes it. So that's the only thing that I can honestly say. The price didn't change much. Cat litter went up a little, but overall, I just saw a very much difference. I was previously a Jewel and Aldi's, and I turned into a Target and Aldi's for grocery shopping.
Well, if you're in Uptown, they're across the street from each other.
No, I'm out in the suburbs. And again, it worked in with my work schedule, kind of driving home, ordering it either the night before and picking it up on the way home and then never having to go in the store, things like that. That's what changed. Do you think that really affected also the mindset of people, which
it may
it's
have
true.
affected the mindset of people, especially if they used to go into the store and they're not anymore. And so they're, I don't know if you get as good a sales shopping online as you do if you're in the store.
True.
And so that may be a factor. But I know like the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that food at home only went up 1.7% this past year. But I remember, versus say 2020, when the economy collapsed, there were certain food and meat items that got really cheap. Skinless, boneless chicken breasts, skinless, boneless chicken thighs for 80 cents a pound, good quality steaks that they couldn't sell to the restaurants anymore because they were all closed down.
But again, you'd go in the store. I mean, I wasn't ordering meat that way. I don't eat a lot of meat, but you'd got to go in the store to see these specials when you're just kind of doing it online.
And I think one of the reasons for that difference is when you're there in person, they're thinking they need to get you to buy something you were not otherwise going to buy with a low price. And I think they're more expecting with an app that you're looking for, what you want and you're looking for that, and you aren't going to see a whole bunch of sale ads. Maybe that's not true of everybody, but if you walk around the store, I notice that we do tend to notice more sale items than if it's an app. I get tired of looking it out on my cell phone pretty quickly.
That's why they have full screen computers to look at the prices of the ads.
Yeah.
I miss paper ads delivered to the house. I can get them in the stores, but I have to go to the stores to get them.
I don't disagree with you.
I want to agree about Jewel. During the pandemic, I started using a grocery service, Imperfect Foods, and I would still need some groceries, so I would supplement by ordering online from Jewel and having them delivered. And the prices were pretty shockingly high. I feel like I paid for convenience.
Mhm.
That's what I feel like.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
that's that $16 Big Mac meal that got delivered.
I still get paper ads. They come in the mail instead of paper. But I don't notice. I think I get just as many ads as before.
They just stopped going to my neighborhood in the city.
I never looked at that much because when I go to the store, I don't care what the can of this, can of that costs because I buy almost exclusively fresh things, either fresh meat or fresh vegetables, and I got to look at it. I'm not going to just say, oh, I want broccoli. I'm going to say, what's the broccoli look like? What's the cauliflower look like? What's 3 kinds of lettuce look like? And I pick the one that looks the best for the price. So I can't order online.
Before we lose many more people, I just would like to thank Karl and David for all the work that they put in. This is not an hour before the meeting where they get together and decide what they're going to say. These slides go through several, if not 4 or 5 different generations. They challenge each other to bring you the best information. David is doing a tremendous job, both posting in Threads and in X. X is the Twitter. And at NWSOFA, where we are on Threads, we're NWSOFA.teams, and on X, we are at NWSOFA. We like those tweets of David's, we share, and then we amplify them by putting information that we think is critical. And I just huge thank you, David, for everything that you do, all the research. You're constantly putting your stuff out there, and the people that you respect and you follow out there. So nice job. I just wanted to put that in before we. Oh, he did? Oh, that's a shame.